When Mrs. Knowles first contacted me, I drugged my feet in responding to her for about a week and a half, hoping, number one, she would cancel me, saying that I took too long to respond. Number two, just thinking that trying to get peace about the prayer, God, you really don't want me to do this, right? And people can be in the flesh, people can make mistakes, and I'm like, surely the person that put me on that list had to be in the flesh at that moment, so you really don't want me to do this, right? But obviously that didn't work. So we have the choice of dealing with, how God's working in your heart, your salvation. The way God's been dealing with in my heart lately has kind of a long thread to it, but my salvation testimony has a longer thread to it, so I'm going with the short one today. But I came here to Bible college in 1991, literally fresh out of Saudi Arabia, out of Desert Storm. My first trip here on campus was literally, we flew out of Saudi Arabia on a Wednesday night. We got to Fort Hood on a Thursday morning, or on Thursday night. We turned in our weapons to the armorer, went to bed, got up the next morning, in process to Fort Hood, signed out on leave in the afternoon. Saturday morning early, we jumped in the van at our church and came up here to preaching conference, got up here on Saturday night. Sunday morning, I'm in the shower room in the boys' dorm, literally taking my shaving kit apart and dumping Saudi Arabian sand into the garbage can at preaching conference 1991. But you're trying to find God's will, and you're seeking for God's will in all of this. And I knew God was calling me to go to Bible college, and I knew I wouldn't be right with God if I didn't get out of the military and come here to Bible college. So that's what I did, and I took that as a call to preach. So I went to the missions field, or I took the missions degree program, which actually turned out to be kind of a benefit, because I actually was not awarded the degree, which applies to what's going on right now. But I came here to college, completed the academic requirements for the missions degree, and then started looking for God's will. And started driving truck, and to pay off my school bill and to make the quickest money with the least amount of investment to support my family. And just started looking for God's will. I drive a truck, I can get a job anywhere. So it's like everybody that comes through, God, do you want me to go here? God, do you want me to go there? It's like, no, stay here. Church in Pennsylvania, my hometown up in Wausau, Wisconsin, Pastor Moody is up there. My church back down in Texas, I loved it down there. God, do you want me to go there? No, stay here, okay. And so I stayed here, believing that it's God's will. In a sense, you could say I'm a missionary to Gary. I love my church bus. I love my kids. I love my family. All right. But lost my train of thought. But I just, kept on searching for God's will. And always in the back of my mind, I had this thought that this isn't the final track that I have you on. You've got something going forward, just pay attention. So I'm here, I'm raising my children. Finally, my youngest child is going to come to Bible college for a year, and she lasted a grand total of 1 day. She comes to college, she moves into the dorm. She was just going to go for the 1-year Bible college certificate because she didn't feel called to be a Christian teacher or anything, but just wanted to increase her Bible knowledge. And many of you know she had some health issues. She had adrenal fatigue, and she was having some chronic energy issues, chronic fatigue issues. So she wanted to save her energy, and she decided she was going to commute on campus on a skateboard in order to save as much energy as possible. So on the first day in the dorm, she's out there in the girls' dorm. We've got the hill skating down there. So she decides to practice on her skateboard, and she comes rolling down the hill, gets going a little bit too fast, jumps off to try and stop, and does the turn and plant with her foot and snaps both of the bones in her lower leg right in front of the girls' dorm, which brought a screeching halt to her Bible college career after her about 24 hours. So yeah, she was incapable of going to school at that point. So we started, and we had started talking afterwards about that, about, what direction she wanted to go. She was considering the idea of going to Ivy Tech for accounting. The girl's a brainiac. She makes me look silly. So we started praying in that direction, and it was through that God started nudging me. It's like, okay, you've been looking for your direction. Here it is. I want you to go back to school. And like, what? And God, yes, okay, you've known all along that this isn't, this isn't your final path, all right? This is the path I want you on. Go back to school. So I said, okay. So I started looking around and talking and asking around, and I actually got to talk to Mr. Todd for a while. I don't know if he's in here or not. So, and he said something to me. I'm repeating what he said to me, so if you got a controversy with it, you got to talk to him, all right? But I was talking to him, and, the thoughts that I had was I was going to go for a machinist, which is, I like working with my hands. I like working metal. I like auto mechanics. I like tearing things apart, and stuff like that. So he looks at me and he says, Greg, you know what? He said, I've known you for a long time. He said, you're a thinker, all right? You like to figure things out. He said, don't sit there and waste your time plugging parts in and out of the machine, all right? Go do something. If you're going to go to school, go do something that you can use your brain, all right? Go somewhere where you can figure something out. Go be an engineer or something like that. And I was like, you know what? That makes sense. So I started looking over the curriculum at Ivy Tech and the different things that they had, and they had a program concerning cybersecurity. And I was like, it has a tie-in to what I did in the military. I was communications security, same field as Tim Gunzenhauser was in the Marines that he talked about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. But had a tie-in there, familiar with security protocols and whatnot, and started praying about it, and God said, yeah, start taking that step. So I started following that procedure, enrolled in the school, and literally the first day of school, the teacher started talking. And I was worried about finances. I didn't have the money to pay for any of this, or I was really, I was going to be scraping to try and throw, if I was going to make payments, a couple $100 a month out of tuition costs, I was going to be tight. Started the first day of class, and the teacher started going on and says, we have some exciting things going on here. We're getting Department of Defense grants. We are getting this virtual range from Israel coming to Ivy Tech in Valparaiso to set up this virtual playground, I guess you could say, to learn cybersecurity. And we're getting NSA grants, and we're getting National Science Foundation grants, and we're getting all this money and the jobs and internships, and that they haven't. None of that has really come to pass yet, but they're literally, I'm thinking maybe this fall everything's going to finally gel, and they're going to get some jobs there, but everything just started falling into place. And it's that idea of, that verse in the Bible that says, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And if you just take that step, each step you take, the light shines one more step further down the path. And the more I attended class, the more God just started to hammer the fact that this is your path. And it just gave me a will that really I had never experienced before. You talk about God's will and the call to preach. I remember a preacher saying things like, God's answered your prayer when you get up off your knees and you feel like you're pawing at the dirt, wanting to get going. And I had never experienced that going to Bible college. But in this last year going to school, this course of study, it's like God's just put, and I know it's God putting it in my heart because it's not of me, because I didn't have any idea about it. And it kind of changed my ideas on that verse in the Bible that says that God worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And I thought it was all, okay, God puts in us a will, all right, it's our will that God blesses. But no, it's God's will that he puts in you. It's not our will, it's his will that he works in you that gives you that paw. And I just started getting that focus on this. And I look at this and I was just like, man, I just want to smash this. Like I've never, really focused on anything before. And I started going in this direction. And then I started, to transfer to what God's been working in my heart lately about. I was reading in the book of Ezekiel. We started read the Bible through in a year, last year, I think it was. So I'm finally up to the book of Ezekiel on last year's read the Bible through in a year. And but I was reading through Ezekiel chapter 20. And I read through it once, and it's like God said, read that chapter again. And so I said, okay, read it again. And started popping some questions in my mind. And the guy said, read it again. And I'm like, God, I'm supposed to get 3 chapters done today. Come on, I got to get this done, right? And so I read it again. And these questions started to pop into my mind. And then these 7 verses stuck out to me. I'll try and buzz through them real quick, I promise. All right? Saying to them, thus saith the Lord God, in the day when I chose Israel and lifted up mine hand unto the seed of the house of Jacob, made myself known unto them in the land of Egypt, when I lifted up mine hand unto them, saying, I am the Lord your God. In the day that I lifted up my hand unto them to bring them forth of the land of Egypt into a land that I had espied them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Then said I unto them, cast ye away every man the abominations of his eyes, and defile not yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. But they rebelled against me and would not hearken unto me. And they did every man cast away the abominations of their eyes. Neither did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Verse 9, but I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be polluted before the heathen among whom they were, in whose sight I made myself known unto them in bringing them forth out of the land of Egypt. Wherefore I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my statutes and showed them my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. More also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. And as I'm reading that, I'm having questions pop up in my mind. And the first one was like, okay, why did God lift Israel out of Egypt in sight of all the heathen nations around them? And you think about, okay, he's bringing them out, and the reason being that was in the text is that he wanted to show those nations that he was God. All right, he wanted to bless Israel. And then the second question was, why did God want to make himself known to the heathen? All right, why is he worried about making himself known to all these pagan, idolatrous nations? And the answer is because he's their God too. And he wants their worship in the same way he wants our worship. And he's trying to draw them unto himself. And you sit there and you start chewing on this for a little while. And you get the idea that God is, here's Israel. He's wanting to bless Israel. He's wanting to lift Israel up and just hammer Israel with blessings so he can show to the world that he is their God and that he loves them and that he can be a blessing. And I just sit there and I started thinking, it's like, okay, God, is this the way you want to deal with us? Is this the way you want to deal with our church? Is this the way you want to deal with us individually? And I just started chewing on that, and just the idea, it kind of gave you the idea that God's standing in the background going like, hey, guys, you want to see a blessing? I can bless these people. Watch this. And he's standing back ready to throw all these blessings down, but he can't, because here they are. He gives them this land flowing with milk and honey. He gives them all these blessings, brings them out of Egypt, but he can't lift them up because they're profane. They started out profaning the Sabbath. Then they fell into adultery with all the women around there. And then they fell into the point where they were offering their children as human sacrifices to these gods. And God started, that will thing started coming again. And it's like, God, is this how you deal with us? And I'm just sitting there thinking, God, I don't want to be that kind of a hindrance. I want to be the kind of person that you can bless. I want to be I don't know how to explain it, but that pause started coming back again. It's like, God, I want the garbage out of my life. God, whatever it is, get this garbage out of my life. I don't want to have this garbage in my life that will prevent your blessing. And at that point, God was like, really? You really want my blessing? He said, now think about it for a second, all right? I blessed Jesus. Jesus was lifted up and crucified for his problems, all right? Is that really what you want? And the answer, the obvious answer is yes. The obvious answer that you should answer is yes, I want to have God's blessing. But yet at the same time, you look at, when Jesus was in the garden, Jesus was about to be crucified, and Jesus said, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst remove this cup. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So Jesus was, it's like God was asking him, do you really want this to happen? And Jesus' response was kind of like, yes, but, if I really don't have to go through this, I really don't want to. But at the same time, this is my will for you. So and I guess that's the way God's been dealing with my heart is, do you really want to glorify God? Because you have to have the humility to give all the glory to God. That was Israel's problem. They wanted to keep the glory to themselves. They couldn't glorify God. And I guess that's the way that God's challenging my heart is, can you really give the glory to God if I bless you? And that is my prayer. That's the way God's been dealing with my heart, and I hope it's yours as well.